was just thinking about whack-a-mole. It's like a game and it has holes in it. Then you have this little mole that comes up from the hole and you're supposed to whack it before it goes back down, but then you miss it. Well, I was just thinking, it's just kind of the way life is. You have something you need to do and you start working on it, but then something else comes up and you start going over here. It's kind of like that movie, Up, squirrel. Then you just feel so busy, 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 busy. And you just wish there was some kind of button to slow your life down. In last week's video, we talked about essentialism, which is creating some space in your time in your life by determining what's important. Well, this is sort of like that, but it's different because this week we're going to talk about living a slower life. In order to live a slower life, you really need to be able to determine what's important first. So last week's video is really important. If you haven't seen it, please go and watch it and I'll link to it at the end of this video. So what is a slow life? We have to know what it is to be busy before we can determine that. And you might be saying, well, I know what it is to be busy. There are some thoughts about being busy by this guy named Kyle Kowalski, and he has a website, slowwith2ws.co. And he has these thoughts about it. One is, and this kind of rocked my world a little bit when I heard this, that busyness is a badge of honor and it's a trendy status symbol. We think it's cool to say we're busy. It used to be if somebody asked you, how are you? You'd say, good, great. It's not very often you actually tell someone how you are if they ask that question. But more and more and more people are saying busy. So you see somebody at church, how are you doing? Busy. And it's interesting how that's happened. It's almost like we are saying, well, we are worthwhile, we are important because we have so much to do. Or sometimes being busy is a way to head off any requests that are coming to you because I am too busy to be doing that. If you have a job, you always want to look busy or say you're busy because that's a way to keep your job. But the problem is that can actually interfere with relationships and things you should be doing instead. I used to work with someone who would tell me that they were too busy to actually talk to me and they were too busy to let me finish a sentence. That was the reason for interrupting me, you see. It's because they were too busy to hear what it was. So they would jump in and interrupt me in the middle of that. And then I would go, well, that isn't what I was going to say. So I then start saying it again and they would interrupt me. And it would just go on and it took so long for me to get a simple thought out. And I used to think this would take so much less time and they could get on with their busy life if they would just slow down and let me finish my sentence. There's busyness as part of FOMO, fear of missing out. And we want to do everything and be everything and go everywhere and try every hobby imaginable and have our homes perfectly clean and declutter everything. And because if we don't, we're missing out in some way. Then there's a busyness that's just a byproduct of our digital age. We are now connected to the entire world 24/7. So we always have something we can do, something we can fill our mind with. We don't have to be bored in any way. If somebody else is driving, we can look at our phone when we're going somewhere. If we're waiting for food to come in a restaurant, we can fill our mind with something. And then, of course, sometimes busyness is just necessity. Maybe we need to work multiple jobs. Maybe we have to work and we have small children and a home to maintain. So we really are busy. But sometimes we're busier than we really need to be because of the type of decisions we're making. Busyness is a choice, and that's an important thing to remember. And then sometimes busyness is an escapism. By keeping ourselves really busy, then we don't have to think about the things that are really important or that are bothering us. Even questions like, who am I and what am I supposed to be doing? What would I like to do in my life? Why am I having this problem? So we don't like it, or maybe we're having depressed feelings or whatever it is. In order to keep ourselves from doing the thing we don't want to do or to think about the thing we don't want to think about, we just keep ourselves busy. Joshua Becker, who's the author of Becoming Minimalist, and he has a website I believe, and he has a YouTube channel. He said busyness is at its core about misplaced priorities. I think that's really interesting. That maybe most of the things we're choosing to do that are keeping us so busy aren't that important. Busyness is not the same as working hard. I think about my grandparents. My grandfather was a farmer and a rancher, and he ran cattle, and he'd run them out in this field and up in the mountains, and he raised hay and corn and I don't know what else. So he worked very, very, very hard. And when he was at work, he was fully at work. Although he enjoyed his experience. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Then my grandmother, she was raising a garden, and she was bottling the food and taking care of the house and sewing and just all of that. And she worked really hard, but I wouldn't say that she was busy. Not in the way we think about busy now. An example of that is when she cooked. She cooked really, really fast. Wonderful cook. She was really quick at it, and then she'd set the table beautifully, and then we'd eat, and we'd sit, and we'd eat, and we'd enjoy the food, and she'd tell what she'd been doing, and we would talk about everything, and she'd talk about her family, and being raised, and what the neighbors were doing, and we'd talk about ourselves, and she would be interested in everything we were doing. And those meals, the actual meals, lasted quite a long time because she wasn't too busy to really talk to us. It was all about us anyway. She just loved us. And my grandfather, who worked so hard, he enjoyed the whole process. Like, he used to have milk cows that he milked every morning and every evening. He'd go out there, and you'd hear him out there just singing away. He just sang to his milk cows. And he used to do the same thing when he was on his tractor, plowing his fields. He'd be singing, he'd be thinking about stuff, because he wasn't listening to the radio and filling his minds with other things. He was noticing the rhythm of life, what was happening. He knew exactly where all of his crop was at every stage. He knew all of his cows, although he told us, you do not name the cows. We were not allowed to name the calves because they were practical. He was really observant. He had his horses, and he loved his horses. So he was worked very hard, but he wasn't busy, because busy is really a frame of mind. It's kind of a shift to think of it that way, isn't it? We're talking about slow living now, and how can we get ourselves there? As we chat, I'm going to let you watch me do some gardening. It has a lot to do with the topic, which you're going to understand later. Just a little bit of backstory on the yard. It is in quite a mess this year because I'm the one who does the weeding and trimming back and things like that. And last summer, I was completely out of action because of long COVID. So I have a lot more to do in this yard than I normally do. With our yard, even though it's large, it is built in such a way that it's pretty easy to maintain as long as you stay on top of it. So you get it kind of straightened out in the spring, and then if I spend like a half an hour, 45 minutes every day going around and weeding and keeping things under control, then it's just a really nice process, and I really enjoy it. But this year, there's so much to be done because I couldn't do it. I'm doing it though this year in this slow way of really enjoying it and not doing what I normally do, which is, I gotta get this done. I gotta get this done. The faster I can do it, the better it will be. Oh, but I'm too busy to be out here wasting all this time getting this yard all caught up. If you're enjoying this and relate to any of it, would you give the video a thumbs up? And of course, I'd love it if you subscribe, because we talk about this kind of thing. Slow living, simple life, decluttering, what we need to do just to be happier. So what is slow living? Well, slow living is a cultural movement to take us from this busy mindset, fast culture, to enjoying our life. It has nothing to do with speed, pretty much. Some people mistakenly think that in order to live a slow life, they've got to do everything very slowly. But it's not. It's about doing things the right speed. So some days you may be doing things really quickly, like my grandmother cooked really quickly, and then other things you'll go slow, like we used to sit around and talk. And it's interesting to me because the actual slow living kind of movement started with slow food. In the 1980, I think 86, there was a guy named Carlo Petrini in Italy, and the very first McDonald's fast food was opening up in Rome. So he protested that. He thought that was terrible. A few years later, a movement was started, slow food, with the idea that you're going to cook the slow, normal way, using really good food, sit around the table and really enjoy eating. Sounds just like what I grew up. Eating was an event and we really enjoyed it. And that's how it was most of our lives raising our children. Darn the internet and darn the phones, everybody going their own direction. So now we're working towards getting back to eating together as a family. And it's actually the 6-year-old that's causing it to do it, because she'll come around and she'll say, can we all eat together as a family? I really like that. Slow living is also a philosophy that challenges us in the modern world to step back and question the process of efficiency. And is that something we want to be ultra concerned with? Carl Petrini said, being slow means that you control the rhythms of your own life. You decide how fast you go in any given context. If today I want to go fast, I go fast. If tomorrow I want to go slow, I go slow. What we are fighting for is the right to determine our own tempos. So how do we start living slower lives? One of the things we should do is spend time outside, which is why I'm showing you this about the yard. I've determined that this year I'm going to slow down and I'm going to enjoy the entire process of getting my yard back in shape. Instead of this OCD, just enjoy seeing what it is. No music. I'm not listening to my iTunes. I'm just enjoying it and thinking it and admiring how this area looks when I get all the weeds out, thinking about the flowers I might want to put in there, allowing my mind to roam and thinking about questions I have or things I'd like to do, and just going until I feel tired. And then when I feel tired, I stop. And then I work on it again the next day. I used to would have been so anxious and so nervous and just pushed myself that I had to get this entire area that I'm showing you all done, all the weeds out. This time I was like, no, I'm going to really slow down and do it well. And being outside is so good to slow our lives down. Nature is such a great teacher, because no matter what we do, we can't shorten the amount of time it takes to grow something. We could extend the growing season by starting some seeds inside, but the amount of time it takes to plant that seed and harvest seed is not up to us. It's just going to take what it takes. We can't control the weather. We can't control the temperature. There are just so many things about it. If we slow down, we can admire, hear the birds chirping. We can hear the breeze going. We can feel the breeze on our face. And our body just feels it if we allow it to, and we get more in the rhythm and nature. Every article, every book that I have read about slowing life down recommends that you're outside. If you don't have a yard like we do and you have a way to grow some plants in a pot, do that. Can't do that? Go to a park and go for a walk. Just be outside and let nature be your teacher about being slow. Another thing is just, and I've mentioned this several times, understand that busyness is a choice. So if you want to slow down and enjoy yourself, then you've got to question the busyness. You have to question the things you're doing and ask yourself that question: why am I making myself so busy? Just like I talked about in last week's video, you have to determine what's essential to you, and then don't do the things that are not essential to you. You need to start slow by downshifting, and Kyle at slow.com talks about this. A good analogy is what happens when you take a drive up in the mountains. Now, we live just a mile away from the Rocky Mountains, and those mountains are very tall. We love to go in and drive around, and as you can imagine, sometimes you're going up a steep grade and sometimes you're coming down a steep grade. Some people feel like the going up is the hardest, but it's really the going down. And the reason why is because the vehicle will pick up speed. If you don't know what you're doing, you start riding your brakes, but if you're not careful, you can burn your brakes off. It's really, really hard on the brake pads to have you pushing the brakes to slow that descent. Instead, what you want to do is downshift. When it starts at a certain point, you, like say you are in drive, then you downshift it to 2, and then you'll downshift it to 1. We love taking our truck up there because it is built into our Ford that when the grade gets to be a certain point, the truck automatically downshifts, and you can hear what happens to the speed of the engine, it getting slower, feel what happens to the truck. it getting slower, and you just feel safer. So if you think about our lives and the speed that our lives can go, sometimes we're like a car going down a mountain at a really steep grade, and we are running away, and we might be applying the brakes instead of going, okay, what's the proper way to do this? And a proper way to do it is just to do one thing at a time, like you only downshift one gear at a time, and make small steps, small things, because you don't want to accidentally then speed your life up or put more pressure on you by trying to live slow. That is like the opposite of what we're trying to do. So one thing at a time. And if you feel yourself feeling too busy, just stop and question and go, wait, what is making me feel this way? Take a breath, get still, notice where your feet are. If you're sitting, notice where your bottom is. Feel the gravity. Listen to your breathing. Where you feel it. You might feel it more in your stomach. You might feel it more in your chest. You might feel it more in your nose. Where do you feel the breathing? If you feel your mind start to spin, as soon as you recognize what it is that you're thinking, it's running away, because that will happen, just go thinking in your head, thinking, and go back to, how does it feel to sit? Or how do I feel to stand? Where are my hands? How does it feel to breathe? You're not trying to breathe in any particular way. You're just feeling how it feels to breathe. And you'll feel yourself just calm down and slow down. I used to have this boss that sometimes it was so stressful to have meetings with him. And I learned to do this. In the middle of a stressful thing, I would say, where are my feet? Where are my hands? I'd feel my feet on the floor, and I'd feel my hands on my lap, and instantly I would start to slow down. Adapt a slow information diet. Be really careful about keeping your phone with you and looking at it every minute. I've gotten so, when my husband and I go out, I often leave my phone home completely, which means that if we have to look something up, I have to borrow his phone. But I know myself will be in the car and he's driving, and instead of me sitting and talking to him, I'll be looking at my phone. And we've gone out to spend some time with each other. I don't want my phone taking over. And it's really interesting when you go into a restaurant without your phone, because we've become so conditioned that we're in a restaurant and we're waiting for the food to come and we can't be bored. Oh no, our minds can't be bored, not 1 second. So we start looking at the phone and we start scrolling. But so if we slow down the amount of information we get, and we're more thoughtful about when we're going to watch a video or we're going to look at a website, whatever it is, social media can be such a waste of time for me. If we're more thoughtful about that, then we have time for our mind to see what's going on, because one of the most important things about slow living is just to notice, like you're listening to me right now. So if you're fully listening to me and you're noticing where you're sitting, you're standing, or you're walking, then you've got a complete experience going on. So that's what we're trying to do. Commit to putting your life before work, which can be difficult if you're a workaholic, but you can just begin by, when I leave the building, I'm going to leave the building. I'm going to leave it behind. Learn to do some meditation techniques, take a drive, do something that can cause you to leave that behind. Make sure you create space in your life and in your day. Don't fill up every single minute. I talked about this in last week's video. You need to create a buffer and know that everything's going to take at least 50% longer than you think. If you're trying to live slowly, it's not going to help. If you really are, I'm going to do everything. Just kind of go with the flow a little bit, really. Going back to the kind of life we have, and if you're younger than me, it's not a fairyland. It's not a crazy thing. It's the way life has been through the history of the world until the last few decades. So it is possible to get back to that life, and it is so worth it, but you have to choose. You have to choose not to be busy, and you have to choose to have slow moments, or just even to notice what you're doing when you're doing something on the busy scale. Be there to do that one thing at a time, instead of, I'm doing this while I'm thinking about what I'm going to do next. Here's the video about declutter your time I mentioned. And here is a video that YouTube, who knows you much better than I do, has decided is great for you.